Welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. We'll guide you through the ups and downs of note investing and teach you all about the nitty-gritty details of the business that other people won't talk about. Your host, Dan Deppen, is a former aerospace engineer and product manager who transitioned away from cubicle life to full-time note investing in 2018. Our website is www.fusionnotes.com, where you can subscribe to this podcast, comment, and find links to other information on note investing.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Deppen, and today I'm joined by Derek Louden from Gardiner Capital Group. Derek, how you doing?
I'm good, Dan. How are you? Good to be here.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, it's funny, one of those people I haven't seen like face to face in like a few years, even though we talk on the phone now and then. But you know, you're kind of one of the earlier people I met in the notes world. I think back at Note Expo 2017-ish or 18-ish.
Yeah, it would have been like 18 or 19, like, right? Yeah,
18, somewhere probably in there. So maybe kick us off by just like telling us a little bit about you and kind of what you do in the notes world.
Yeah, happy to give you the elevator speech here. So I have been in some form of real estate investing for a number of years, and my family did it before me, but specifically with the notes piece. When I guess you could say I got into the notes kind of like a lot of people do, right? You hear them, they are doing some form of rentals, or maybe they're a flipper, and then they say, well, maybe having tenants and toilets and all that stuff is not really for me. And although it works great for some people, it wasn't for me. So I started searching for, something that could give me a good, what they call risk adjusted return, right? As you're investing money, you want something that's going to compensate you for any risk that you're taking. And so, like anybody else, started listening to content, talking to people, and you were one of the folks. I think you got one of my cold emails. Just kind of reaching out to folks in the industry, trying to find people that I could kind of ride on the sideline with and figure out how to do the thing. And the more I learned, the more I said, all right, well, this is something that I think could that I could turn into something that I could do on the side, because I work full time and have a family, wife, kids, all that stuff. So I needed something that wasn't going to just soak up all my time. And this seemed like it was going to give me that right balance between return on an investment, return on my time, but also not just completely consume everything to get those returns. So I'd say it's probably like 2017 or 18. Started doing the research, and what I was finding is that all of the paths I was going down, I was listening to all the podcasts and stuff, and they all ended up with like some sort of a paid training. And I had done that road in another initiative a while back, and I said, man, like, there's just got to be a better way. I've got a little time, I've got a little capital. If I have to get into this and lose some money and call it education, then I'll do it. So
some of those programs are pretty expensive as well.
They can
right?
be, and and they have they have their place, right? Like, but I think there's like fundamentals that you can sit and you can watch a bunch of videos and you can talk to a bunch of people, you can listen to all the podcasts in the world, but like, you're never going to learn until you actually get out there and it's your money on the line, and you're making the moves, or you're asking the questions, and you're making the mistakes. Because like when you make those mistakes, like that stuff sticks with you. And it's making all those, an expert is somebody who's made all the mistakes, right? That's the old saying. And so I said, all right, I just need to find somebody that's out there doing this thing. And that's when I think I found a local meetup group and paid a VA to strip all the emails out, because I didn't hide the emails, which I think I got lucky. And I emailed like 300 people. And I think the email was like, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody to, I've got a little capital. I'm looking to learn. I don't want anybody to come at me with paid courses or anything like that. I'm looking literally for a partnership. And I probably talked to 20 or 30 people that came back to me, because essentially what I did is I raised my hand and said I had some money. And so here come all these people with, deals, but no money, which is fine. And then I talked to, you're one of them. You obviously made the short list. We did that JV together, and I did 3 JVs and kind of watched the process. And then what I started to see was that was like, 2018, 19, I was still kind of learning. What I was starting to hear was like pricing was starting to go up, and it was the asset class was getting a little bit more attention. And all the guys that I saw I could tell they knew what they were doing. All of a sudden they were like buying bigger tapes and starting to raise funds. And like they were moving up the food chain, so to speak, so they could continue to get that pricing. And I said, man, I'm just not there yet. Like I'm not going to go raise a fund. I'm still in the middle of these JVs. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's when I got to my current place where I said, well, if I could somehow get into a place where I was getting first look at a bunch of deals that weren't on, the paper stacks and all the public exchanges, which again, those are fine and appropriate places, but you're just not going to get the best pricing there. You're going to pay retail. Right. And so I said, well, if I can get out there and find a couple of deals and I get first look at them and decide, hey, is this a good deal for me? Does it fit my criteria? Is it where I want it to be? Is it the right size? Then I could seek out help and go and see if I can take it down, or I could broker it off. And so that's what got me doing this kind of hybrid brokering and buying model that I'm in now.
Yeah. And I'm interested in learning more about how you got into brokering, because it's kind of a hot topic. Like, people ask me a lot about it. I've never really done it. I think I brokered like one note in my entire life, and it was just sort of a one-off. It was the way it worked out. Like, I didn't go out looking to do that, but I know that's a way like a lot of people like to enter the business, because you don't necessarily need a bunch of capital to go and do that. Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit more about like what led you down that path.
Sure. I think I went to the Paper Source the symposium out in Vegas in like 2018, I want to say, maybe 2019. And I heard this guy, Jeff Armstrong, and you can look him up.
Yeah, I saw him talk at the, I'm drawing a blank now, but with the conference I was just at back in April, Paper Source. Yeah.
He's been around, and he that's what he does. He is go out and find individual owner finance notes, right? And this is literally one person. So I don't know, your listeners are going to come from all over the place, but there's kind of two ways you can do it. You can go out and you can source your notes from institutional hedge fund, whatever, where they've been originated by a bank or an institution of some kind, or they're these, call it mom and pops out there that they own a house and they want to sell it, and maybe they can't get somebody that is going to qualify for traditional bank financing. So if they have free and clear equity in the house, they can essentially write a contract, take a down payment just like bank, and write a promissory note and have a mortgage or a deed of trust. And then they are carrying that note, and the person that's buying the house from them is going to make payments to them. And those are one-offs, and they can be, I've seen them as small as $10,000, and I've seen them north of $1 million. Like, they're all over the place, and they carry all kinds of terms. So Wild West is, I guess it gets thrown around. I mean, it's not that crazy. When I was first getting into it, I remember there's a guy up in the Pacific Northwest, and he had this long page about like how, these owner finance notes are, they're written on bad paper, and they're not worth going after. And I haven't read that to be the case. But back to your original question, I guess in my head, I was like, well, I can, if I can go out and source the deals myself, meaning go out and market for them. And I'll talk about the marketing piece in a minute, because that's fundamentally what it is. It's being really, really good at marketing and getting the most inbound. Anybody that is listening to this that's tried wholesaling or anything like that, like, it's the same kind of thing. You got a funnel, right? You start up here, and you got to hit a qualified audience, and you work your way down the funnel. Eventually, some of those will drop out into closed deals at the bottom. But I said, well, if I get, first look at them, meaning nobody else is bidding on them, right? The person might not know what they have. Maybe this is probably the only note they've ever carried. So they don't necessarily know kind of how it all works. Maybe I can help educate them and get them to a deal that's going to give them what they need, right? Which is, if they need a little cash for whatever, I can help them with that. And then in exchange, I collect those payments going forward. And that was the one piece of it. Then the second piece was, when you're brokering a note, typically you're working on the other side of the table with somebody who's more experienced than you are, right? Because I'm bringing a deal to somebody else. So that was kind of an iteration of the JV arrangement, where I said, all right, well, I'll bring somebody a deal, and I'm basically going to, I've done the work, I've spent the money, which I'll talk about that in a minute, to bring them this deal. Now, what they're going to do kind of in return, informally, for that is they're going to show me how they vet the deal, right? I'm going to get to hear all the questions they ask. I'm going to get to see everything that they want from a file, what's good, what's bad. When they see one, they say, whoa, no way, I'm not taking that one. I can be like, all right, like, help me out. Why didn't you like that? And they say, well, this. And I say, okay, well, now any other one that comes across my desk, if I see those features, I can be like, all right, I know that's, not worth getting into. So, you do enough of those, and all of a sudden you start to just kind of get in your head this sense of like, you can look at a deal and say, all right, like this one's worth digging into, or, I see this, or I can just kind of tell by talking to a seller that they're not serious, or they don't know what they're talking about, or maybe they're not shooting straight. And so that's part of the experience. And I've picked up a lot over the past 2 years in doing that. So
it sounds like kind of you gotten to the point with scrubbing these where you can kind of do like back of the envelope type analysis. Like I know in my business, I've seen that where, we'll build all these like systems and spreadsheets, but then you do it enough and it's like, you don't even necessarily always need to use it. Like you just kind of know by looking at stuff. Yeah.
And you find like brokering, I mean, the one of the other major things is, from a marketing perspective, you got this thing. This is what Jeff Armstrong, and I'd recommend anybody go out and he sells some information. I know you got, of course, his is more owner finance and brokering focused. That's why I'm talking about it that way. But, I don't know he charges very much, but that's kind of where I started. And he talks about having multiple lines of marketing in the water. So you might be doing classified ads and direct mail and paid search and, talking to real estate agents and stuff like that. And you kind of have all these lines in the water, and you never really know what one is going to bite at any one time, but you kind of got to be doing them all in order to kind of pull those leads in. You talk to enough, and you can kind of, when you get a seller talking to you, you can kind of say, all right, this guy's not serious. Or like, I can tell he's talking to 6 other people and like, he's just looking for the best price. And, the way you make money as a broker is you are getting a deal, you're taking it to a funding source, and they're going to give you an offer, and then you subtract off something to cover your cost plus a little profit. And there's no like hard and fast rule of what that is, right? So you have to understand, like, if you're the only one they're talking to, you might have a little bit more latitude, but if they're talking to 3 other funding sources, like you're essentially bidding against them in terms of who's going to take the thinnest slice. So
that's a pricing game at that point.
And like sellers, they'll work with who they trust, right? So there's a tremendous amount of rapport building and like making sure that as you're talking with them, you can instill a sense of, okay, I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to shoot straight with you. I'm going to tell you what it's worth. And like, if you don't like that, that's fine. Like, call me back if you change your mind down the road. But like, if we're way far off in terms of our pricing, what I tell people is I say, I'm going to give you an offer that works for me. Right. If it works for you, great. If not, then we can part ways, and, no harm, no foul.
Yeah. I mean, how do you build trust with those sellers? So I'm guessing like a lot of these are, mom and pops that might have one seller finance note that they ended up with. However, they're not really in the business, and maybe they don't understand the whole concept of note selling at a discount to get a certain yield. So when you come in like as kind of an unknown and you're offering them something less, maybe a lot less than the principal balance, like how do they normally react, and how do you kind of build rapport with them?
Honesty is the best policy, right? Like, that's first and foremost the place that I come from. And so I tell them right up front, put yourself in their shoes. How would you like it if you're reaching out and somebody is, telling you all the things you want to hear, like, oh yeah, we can get best price, and this can be super easy and all this and that. And then, you get into the reality of it, and all of a sudden they figure out, oh, it's actually going to take, your offer is going to be lower than you said it was going to be, and it's going to take longer than, you led me to believe it was going to take. They're not going to be happy. You wouldn't be happy, right? And so I come right out of the gate and I address, this is probably going to take a little bit longer than you expect. Closing an owner finance note is, give or take 30 business days, right? Because there's a number of steps you go through. And then the pricing, it depends. It depends on how long their note is structured for, how long they gave their borrower to pay them back, what the interest rate is, how much of a down payment they got. All of those things will factor into ultimately what that, the back end yield that I'm trying to achieve, and thus the price I'm able to offer them. I've had a couple of people come to me and they've got 30-year 0 interest notes, and I'm like, I've got news for you. A, why'd you do that? And then B, like, the pricing is just not going to be great. So like, if you're happy with that and you want to hang on to it, like, that may be your best option, rather than me making you an offer that, you might either find insulting or just, hang up on me. So I cover those things right up front. I say, hey, the pricing is going to be, in this ballpark, and it's going to take about this long. Are we okay with that? And if they say, yep, then I say, all right, great. Then I'll talk through the rest of it. But if we get to that point and they say, you know what, no, then they've spent 2 minutes to talk to me, and we move on to the next person. So,
well, I mean, it almost sounds like, she talked about you have this marketing funnel, and then when you make contact with sellers, it's almost like this sub funnel where you're kind of, sounds like you're kind of screening as part of that process to see if they're really serious about selling the note for some terms that are going to work. So it seems like you can save yourself a lot of time by basically scrubbing them out or having them scrub themselves out pretty early. Because otherwise I could see you just spent churning like tons of hours on the phone with deals that go nowhere.
Yeah, 100%. Like as I scaled things up and I started having more and more people reach out to me, that became, my time's finite, right? Like I need to focus on the deals that I feel have the best chance of advancing. And the ones that I get the sense, hey, like you're not serious or it's not going to work for you, like we just set those to the side and move on. Depending on what I found is depending on where they come in from a marketing perspective, will dictate the knowledge level that they're coming in the door with. So like I do direct mail. Well, direct mail, they're getting, you buy lists of people from, aggregators that have looked at the public record. When they see a owner finance note get recorded, that makes it in the list anyway. So these people record these mortgages and all of a sudden they get 10 letters saying, hey, I want to buy your note, and so they're like, what is this thing? I didn't even know I could sell a note. Like, so I start like way back. I've started step one there. Like, hey, yes, this is how this works, right? Like I walk them through a quick process of how a note sale is going to work. Whereas somebody who comes to me through like a digital channel, like they've done some research. They've probably gone out and, if you go to my website, there's, 50 others just like it out there, that have a lead form and, I'll give me your name and email and, all this stuff. And they've done that. They're just going from site to site to site. And so they are much more price focused. They're much more, hey, just tell me what it's worth. Right. And so we can cut right to the chase there. And if it works, great. If not, and I always say, like, if you get another offer and I'm close, like, let me know and I can see if I can make the number work. And it's usually, I try to come in real close. Like I'm not giving them a price that's way above what I think is possible. I'm generally over time, you kind of figure, hey, here's about where this is going to come in, plus or minus, $5,000. But where they come in also really dictates, the context and the lens through which they're going to view the transaction.
Right. Now, how does that work if you're brokering? Like, how does that work on the sell side? So you've talked a little bit about, marketing and doing acquisitions. And because I know like one of my challenges, even if I'm just like buying a note or selling it, there are a lot of flaky counterparties, but it seems like brokering, and one of the reasons I personally never like really looked into brokering too hard is now I don't just have to make a deal with one counterparty, I've got two. So like I feel like my probability of success is going down. So like how do you manage that dance?
Yeah, I mean, the flow is like you get a lead coming in and they say, hey, they give you some information. I've got real good contacts with 3 or 4 funding sources that I kind of know what they like, right? Like, and there's always, it's kind of an order of operations. I'll go to my first person here. If they say yes, they give me an offer. Generally, I don't bid it out anywhere else because they have over time shown me that they're going to pretty much come in with the best pricing for me and a good close and an established process. And we've closed, lots of deals together. So they're just reliable. Like we've got a real healthy level of trust there. And they know that when I bring them a deal, like I've got my situation together where I'm following up with the seller. I'm giving them the information they need, the funding source. Right. And so they know that I'm professional and they can trust me and it's not a waste of time. But if there are deals that don't work for them, right? Maybe borrower credit's bad, right? Okay. Well, then I've got another person who has like a whole nother set of questions that I got to ask. So if number one says 0, I'm like, okay, I got to go back and, get all these other answers from the seller, which is just the more friction you introduce, the less like you are to close the deal. Right.
Yeah.
So I try and keep it as easy as I can for that seller. But generally to address your question about the kind of making 2 deals, right? The funding source will come back with the deal that works for them. And then what I do is I subtract my fee and I come to that, the seller with the net offer, and it is what it is. It's worth what it's worth. So if it works, great. If not, it wasn't going to happen anyway. and I wanted to add something to your question before about like, filtering time and filtering out the ones that aren't going to go through. I can remember when I first started off, I started getting these leads in and I would just chase every single one of them. And I would try and make a deal out of something that wasn't going to ever be a deal. Right. And I learned real quick that you're better off focusing on getting more people in the door and getting more responses, right? And driving down, it all becomes like a cost per inbound lead calculation, right? You want to get that cost per lead as low as you can, because then that's going to maximize your success. You're going to get the most amount of leads for the least amount of money.
Well, it sounds like you can afford to do that too, right? Because one of the classic mistakes people make with funnels is they do, they pay for marketing, but then they're paying money to push leads into a leaky funnel. But you've got a pretty good solid funnel on the back end with these acquirers that are reliable and they can close. So that allows you just to like set your criteria and then up the volume of the input that's going into the funnel. Well, one of the things I like about your process too, I know when you sent me stuff, is you've got like this form with like all the details on the deal. So like everything is right there. Like you make it really easy for the buyer, and then usually have like a lot of background information that you've picked up. Like I think one of the mistakes just in general, like note sellers make in the market is that they're like, yeah, I got this note, you go figure everything out. And I'm not going to tell you anything, which to me is a giant red flag, because I'm like, no, if you want to sell this, you would be making it easy for the buyer,
right?
Or something's wrong with it. And
so it's you said two important things right there. One is like, and now I'm going to ask everybody to kind of zoom out and look at like the role a broker has. So you got to put yourself in kind of two places at the same time. Put yourself in the investor's shoes. You got this person bringing you a deal. Okay. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have to offer probably a little bit more than you normally would to compensate that broker. And that this is something you just would get a feel for if you're doing this all the time. What's going to happen then is that broker is going to get compensated between the delta of your offer and what they're going to offer their seller to try and get the deal done, right? Because then they're incentivized not to go too low, because then the seller's not going to take the deal. They need to make the deal work. And by definition, then the broker is bringing value to the table because they're going to get compensated. So the value they bring is by bringing a well-organized package, by knowing proactively what questions the investor is going to want answered, right? And making it, to your point, easy for that investor to evaluate the deal and see, hey, is this right or is it not? And then also, it's incumbent upon the broker to surface any issues that they might see, right? Like, hey, borrower credit's really poor on this one. Like, this guy's got sub 500 credit. And if I know that's a hot button for an investor, I'll call that out. I'll call it out anyway. But I'll say, hey, just so you know, if this is going to shoot a hole in the deal, don't even worry about it. Like, I've got other people that don't look at credit so closely, right? Or if there's, I don't know, any number of things that would come up during due diligence where you're going to want to say, hey, because think about what you would want to know as an investor. And you're going to discover it if you're a competent and experienced investor. Like, it's going to come up eventually. And then the question comes like, well, why didn't you tell me about this 3 weeks ago? Now I've spent time and money on this thing, and now I'm upset because you knew this thing, or maybe you didn't, and then you should have, right? Like, so that's where you got to kind of wear both hats.
Yeah, it's always been one of my big frustrations as a buyer, when I spend a lot of time and sometimes a lot of money on something, and then you find a problem and you just wasted all that. You can't close. But you brought up another good point too. Like, that's such an important service as for me, like as a buyer of notes. You mentioned, okay, if you're going to buy something through a broker, yeah, you're going to pay probably somewhat of a higher price than if you had gone out and found it yourself. But that broker is performing an important function, which is basically that marketing and sourcing to find the deals. So like, as a buyer, I could do all that myself. I could do direct mail and, get a hold of lists and put together this process to find owners of seller finance notes and spend time on the phone, call them. But I don't want to do that because like you, I have a day job as well. And I have my portfolio, like I have enough jobs. So really what I'm doing is kind of like if I'm buying through brokers, I'm really outsourcing that marketing piece to someone else. And when I get a deal, I'm paying, whatever, a couple percent more.
Right.
But for me as a buyer in the grand scheme of things, like that makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you had somebody lay a deal at your feet. And if they've done a good job, then it's easy to look at it. Literally, here's a deal. Like, does this work? And you say, yep, here's how much I can pay. Great. And then they go out and it's kind of like, it's almost you build these relationships and you can kind of curate. Like I said, I've got, 4 or 5 people that I work with pretty regularly. And that's kind of the role that I play. I know what deals they like. And, I got one guy, he hates stuff in New York. Another guy, I get a bunch of church notes and I can take the church notes. Some people don't want to touch.
I've seen those too. I've never gone there or really looked at it, but yeah.
So I've got a couple of folks, one of them that we know that is, he doesn't care. He'll take a look at anything. He doesn't care about foreclosing on church note, so,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the thing I would say. And the other thing is like, you've got to show yourself as being a reliable source, right? Because I think what a lot of brokers will probably do, and it kind of happened to me a little bit, is you reach out to some of these funding sources, and they get reached out to all the time with people saying, "Hey, I got deals," and they have probably been burned, or they have invested time in somebody only to find out that they're off getting deals from exchanges or daisy chain deals or pulling them off tapes or just being lazy, right? They're not actually doing the work. Like the work that I'm doing is like, I can tell you, I am spending and sending out thousands of letters every single month to people who have just sold a piece of property. So like my deals are extra fresh. I don't know.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the deals that you brought me in the past, I've never seen those anywhere else. You never brought me something. And it's like, oh yeah, I've seen this,
Yeah. And that's a great way, like, to shoot a hole in your credibility, right? So as a broker, is you go to a funding source and you send them a deal and they're like, man, I've seen this from 6 other people. Now it does happen. And sometimes I'll even, with one of my funding sources who's an institution is, I go to them and I'll say, hey, have you seen this deal? And they'll be like, yeah, we tried to buy this deal like 6 months ago. And it just happened that person was, going around trying to find another place to sell it. And actually I love seeing those deals because then I'm like, oh man, this person's tired. Like they have tried and they know they've gotten an offer presented before and it didn't work. So like they're going to be my offer, which is the real offer. I'm not lowballing anybody. They're going to be more open to accepting the reality of the fact that maybe they've got a note that's, not worth what they thought it was.
Yeah, it hasn't happened to me for quite a while now, but I have had people send me tapes with assets on them that I already owned, which is always fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
so,
that.
Hey, give me this one.
Yeah, I felt like making an offer just to see what would happen on the other end. As I was curious.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
cool.
Listen, back to the thing, like honesty is the best policy and transparency is the best way to be in this business, right? Because I know, man, it's a small world. And I find a lot of the time that there's probably, when I'm selling notes, I more than once come up against the same people that have offers on the table with sellers. Sometimes I can come in and I can beat them. And sometimes I just say, it's not worth $500 to me right now. Like if I've got better deals in the pipeline, there's probably count them on one hand, people that I know that I go up against, kind of regularly where I know they're bidding on the other side of the asset.
Right. Yeah. But to your point, like just developing that credibility and reliability is so huge because feels like sometimes it's a world of flakes out there and there's,
right.
A lot of them and some flat out bad actors, which is something I'm considering like putting together some content on coming up. So being that reliable go-to person is awesome. Like I know I bought 2 notes recently from someone who's a close friend and it just makes the whole process so much easier when you know the other person, they're reliable, that, you still have to do your due diligence, but
right.
like, if there's something material, like they would have flagged that ahead
of
time.
And I said a while back, I mean, you mentioned the kind of the worksheet that I put together. Like I'm going to just say it. I stole that from somebody else. I mean, I adapted it to me, but I went and I talked to my funding source and I said, hey, show me the brokers that you really like and that are successful and help me understand how they're presenting deals to you. Right. Mm-hmm. Like show me what they do that you really like, that when you get a deal, you say, oh yeah, this is good. And I sort of took pieces from, different folks, and them telling me what they really like to see. And incidentally, information. They said, hey, ask these 3 questions for me. And so I just make that part of my standard, when I go out and I'm on the front end of a deal, I just go ahead and get those answers from the seller. And if I can't get them or I don't know, then I just say as much. But anyway, that's what I did I'm also very big about not recreating the wheel. So, but yeah. And then the other thing I'll say is follow up is huge in this business, right? So if somebody is talking to 3 other people, the squeaky wheel is going to get the grease. I'll follow up with somebody until they tell me to go away, and I'll say, hey, if this isn't working, let me know. And they say, listen, I already got another offer. I'm already working out of the deal. Great. I'll call me if it falls through, and I'll scratch them off and I'll move to the next one. But I've had deals close where the person just goes away, and, I ping them 3 weeks later and they say, oh my gosh, I got so busy. And, yeah, definitely want to pick this thing back up, and then it'll move to close. Right. And if I hadn't ever followed up, it wouldn't ever have happened.
Well, the other thing I've experienced is there are a lot of flaky buyers. So I've had experiences when I'm trying to buy a note and I get outbid or whatever, and they're like, I'm giving it to this person for this amount. They don't necessarily close. And so I've acquired stuff after I initially lost, which is always fun. So yeah, if you kind of keep pursuing, I mean, back in the day when he's not really active anymore, but when John Keith was selling off all of the window rock, CFDs, there were a handful of those where I would just set a reminder to ping John in 2 weeks. Did this close? Did this close? Oh wait, you know what? The buyer flaked out. Okay, cool. And then I would pick it up.
Yeah, being able to close anything, whether it's notes or real estate or whatever, there's nothing that's going to blow up your credibility faster than getting a deal to the closing table and being like, nah, can't do it. And with sellers too, if you are an investor and you are talking to brokers, you're talking to the other side of the table now. I've had guys that I've sent deals to, and they're, and you do not fall into any of these categories. They're too slow. They don't respond. They're too strict on their criteria. And that's another thing. I have never, as an investor, I've had brokers approach me and say, hey, I've got deals. What kind of deals you like? And I'm like, man, not right now. Because I'm not in a position where I feel, and this is just me being critical of myself, I feel like I'm quick enough that I'm going to offer good enough pricing that I can do a deal where you're going to want to come back to me. Right. And I'm also not going to buy a deal a month. I'm just not at that pace yet. So the brokering side allows me to kind of control my flow in terms of how much opportunity I've got. If I want more, I can dial up my investment. And if not, I can dial it back and things stop.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I think it's a pretty good stopping point for now, but I definitely want to have you on again to dive a little bit deeper into some of this stuff. So thanks so much for coming on.
Can unpack a lot.
If people have other questions for Derek, you can leave them in the comments. And then what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? I have the feeling you'll get some pings.
Email, it's Gardiner, Gardiner, capitalgroup.com. First name's Derek, Derek. So they can email me. I don't know. I'll give you've got my contacts. I don't know if you want to put it in the show notes or something. And
I'll do that.
And then reach out if you got questions, and happy to chat. So thanks for the time, Dan. It's good talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.